How many snaps did they run in the 14 personnel?
That's only for us.
100% of the snaps.
What's going on, guys, and welcome into 14 Personnel Live. And I said live, but really this isn't live today. Sorry about that. But we've got, I know, right? Killing it early. But we've got a great show for you today. But before we jump into anything, I just want to remind all of our listeners that our 14P Fantasy Combine is up and running. And if you haven't heard about it before, we are inviting all of our listeners to test their skills in some of our favorite combine events and support some great causes in the process. And so just head over to 14personnel.com and you can find all the extra info you need and you can enter. We are accepting donations and submissions now through February 15th. And all donations go to St. Jude's and Melanoma Research Alliance. We've gotten some great submissions so far via Twitter, and those are going to be live this week on our website. So we cannot wait to see what you guys do and what other videos you guys got for us. But now we got to just jump into this because I know if you're watching us, you can see that we have a special guest with us, the one and only Matt Harmon. So Matt, how is it going, man?
Things are good. I love the intro video you guys have. That was it was so energetic and it's sick. I love it. I'm happy that you guys had me on today. I'm excited to talk with you both. This is going to be awesome, man.
Yeah, thanks. We're a little bit newer to some of the video side of things, and so we just kind of threw that together last week. So it's our second or third time even running with that intro, but we appreciate it, man.
Yeah, we took a full day of not doing our actual jobs and just we FaceTimed for I think like 4 hours and put together all the graphics and just didn't do a lick of real work. It was great.
Yeah, see, with me, my real job is supposed to be doing stuff like that. So I got to distract myself with other stuff. So which it's a tough thing when, I mean, this is sort of a humble brag, so I apologize right off the top. But it's tough when your real job is your hobby and it's football and stuff. It's like, well, do I distract myself with more football stuff? I don't want to do that. That's so, I read plant blogs and food blogs and stuff like that, or those type of things. So, it's all about work-life balance.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I know from listening and reading some of your content in the past that you're you're a big cook, right? You really like cooking a lot, right?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do, especially just trying new things, different stuff like that, new things, new tools, new things in the kitchen, that type of thing. My fiance too, she loves to cook as well, so it's good to have the back and forth there as well. Yeah, that's one of the things I look forward to the most during the day is prepping different meals and stuff like that. That is definitely my version of the escape. I still somehow manage to end up listening to football podcasts and stuff like that while I'm prepping and everything. But again, you can never really escape the NFL.
Right, exactly. No, I totally hear that. And I'm with you on the cooking side of things. I think COVID's kind of enhanced that for me a little bit of working from home so much. I'm just like, all right, what can I do with my little bits of free time here and there? I'm like, I'm going to start trying to get good at cooking, I guess.
Yeah,
it's definitely a thing that I feel like people have kind of gravitated to more. Some mixed results I'm seeing out there on the Instagram. That's another thing that I have. People always ask me, man, your food looks so good. When you post pictures on Instagram, I'm like, well, again, my fiance is she started out as a food blogger, on Instagram. Gotcha. She worked for those top-down videos, Tasty from BuzzFeed. She used to work on that awesome team. So I have a professional here. I'm not doing a damn thing when it comes to taking the pictures. So yeah, it is it's a lighting trick. It's all that type of stuff. Cause I see a lot of guys will take pictures of I'm doing it for the camera here, diagonal pictures of close up with the chicken wings that they made. I'm like, that's not, you don't want that. So it's a presentation is key.
She's a plating master, if you will.
Oh yeah. When I try to play, when I cook, it's it's going to taste good, but it's just going to be thrown all over the plate. She's got a system. And it ends up making me look good, which is nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm totally with you there. That's kind of how I throw things on a plate too. It's probably going to taste good, but it's going to look not good at all. All right. Well, for maybe some of our newer listeners or listeners who, are getting new to fantasy football in general, I know Justin and I have been big fans of you for a while, and some of the areas where we really watch your stuff is, reception perception, and now, Yahoo Fantasy. But where else or what else are you working on right now? Where can people find you, if they're kind of newer to the fantasy community or newer to fantasy football?
Yeah, basically strictly with Yahoo right now, and obviously doing reception perception. That will be more this off season. I've got some fun stuff cooking up with that, which I will hopefully be able to tell people about in the next few months. That's a little tease there. That's a business sort of thing to do there. Tease that out, give people something to look forward to. But yeah, with Yahoo doing a lot of fun stuff right now, especially as the off season sort of trends is about to happen. Man, we've only got 3 games left here in the NFL season, which is crazy. And I'm glad, that we got through this whole year. It seemed like many times we had some plenty of close calls the last year, but doing weekly videos. Obviously during the season we do fantasy football live, but right now mostly writing. And I don't know about you guys, but I almost kind of love the off-season content creation process because in season so regimented. It's this day is this day. Tuesday we got to talk about waivers. Thursday is like matchups, and then obviously Sunday is just the full-on everything. So it's one of those things where in the offseason you get to really be creative and explore a lot of different stuff, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did a lot of our redraft articles for at least this regular season, and as soon as week 17 hit, I was like, all right, I don't have a schedule. I can just kind of write about what I want to write about and not have to worry about, oh God, it's Monday, 9:00. I haven't written my waiver article. Like not having that those kind of deadlines. And again, like you said, the flexibility it was such a huge relief after the first season of really doing this.
This year too, especially being in, I don't know where you guys live, but like obviously in California and Los Angeles, like we're very heavily locked down, like and nothing going on here. So
we're in Chicago, so it's kind of the same up here too.
Same sort of thing. Yeah, it's like every day already looks exactly the same, it's because we're going nowhere. We're doing nothing. I'm just stuck in these walls of this house. Like, every day already looks the same. And then you get the fantasy season side of it where every day of the week has its own little thing. By the end of the season, it's like, I'm living the same life every week. It's the same thing. It's driving you crazy. So at least one of those things. And honestly, the more fun, which unfortunately the more fun part of it, which is football season, at least that's winding down. So maybe we can start to get some variety here.
Right, exactly. And I think I mean Justin mentioned it, but this is our first time. Really, this is our first season really doing this. We started 14 personnel back in early July. And so this is our first time really going through it. And when we were approaching, the middle of the season, we're like, okay, what are we going to do in the off season? And it really has been exactly what you said. Like, oh, wow, there's so much we can do. And there's so much freedom in what we get to write about in the off season. And it really makes it a lot more fun than you would have thought, going into a season, you're like, okay, this is going to be it. And then it is super regimented. It's all kind of the same stuff every day or every, week. But yeah, so that's been a cool thing as we head into this offseason for us. But I wanted to get a little bit into your kind of background, your history. Matt, how did you get into, fantasy football as a fantasy football fan? And then also, on the other side of it, on the professional side of getting to, where you are now? Yeah,
so first part there, getting into fantasy football as a player, my childhood best friend, Andrew, shout out to Andrew. He still lives back on the East Coast where I grew up. And he basically, I think we were sophomore year of high school. He's like, hey man, we need another person for this fantasy league that we're starting. Do you want to do it? And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. That sounds stupid.
Super nerdy, right?
Yeah, that sounds dumb. I'm not doing that. I don't know enough about I watched football. I knew some things about it, but I didn't feel like I knew enough to really be good at it. But I ended they really needed someone, so I ended up just doing it. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, I have like a very obsessive personality as a kid. So like when I was into Star Wars, I was all into Star Wars, like when especially when the prequels then came out, which they sucked, but like it is what it is. When you're a kid, you don't really understand quality film. But like when my dad got me into Star Wars, I had to have every Star Wars toy. I had to have every Star Wars video game that came out. Like when he and I started watching James Bond together when I was older, I had to like get all into that too. So Lord of the Rings, same thing. I'm probably still that way today, but that's another discussion. But so when I decided that I was going to be in this fantasy league, I actually started playing Madden then, and I figured I was like, this is a good number one. I'm a stupid teenage boy. I like video games. I'll start playing this, and I don't know, something. Honestly, it wasn't so much playing the game, but like franchise mode and stuff like that, being able to construct. I mean, I feel like guys our age, like we've all been through that with Madden, where like we just spent an absurd amount of time on franchise mode, and like that's why I get, shout out to me, I get free copies of the game every year because my buddy Matt Franchise works for EA, and we normally do some collaborative content. But like I barely ever play because I know that if I start like a franchise, you'll never hear from me again. Like I'll be there doing that and scratch that itch.
Well, and one of the crazy things about like when you really get into like franchise mode, specifically on Madden, and part of why I think a lot of people like fantasy football is I can get caught hours just putting my team together, just managing it. And then like I'll play, but really like the best part is like, okay, I'm going to structure this team just the right way. Like that's what I can nerd out about for like days.
You're a sicko when you like get to the point where you're building the roster and then you just sim the season. You're like, I don't care about who cares about playing games. I used to do that all the time.
That is exactly what we did growing up. Like he'd come home from college and we'd go in the basement. He'd be home for like 4 days and we'd leave the basement like twice. And I was like, what'd you do? I'm like, we played 4 games. She's like, over 4 days. I'm like, yeah, we just kept building new teams. That was it.
Doing the fantasy drafts where you play as the Carolina Panthers, and it's like, oh, Tom Brady's my quarterback. But anyways, so that was the best, man. Funny. So I think when I got into that, it was like something about just building teams and like finding players' strengths and weaknesses. Something about that just clicked. So then obviously we do this fantasy league, and I just loved it. I had something about, again, building the teams and like trying to solve little problems, just scratch that like dork itch. I don't know. But anyways, I loved it. And I just became obsessed with football from then on. Like I had to know every player on every roster. My dad would ask me like over the next few years, like, hey, who's the right tackle for the Chiefs and where did he go to college? This guy went to here, used to play for the Bears, picked up blah, 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 all this stuff. And he would like do that in front of like his friends or stuff like that or other family members. He's like, he knows the whole league. So yeah, I'd always become I was obsessed with that. And my friends always used to tell me then, like going into later years of college, like you should start like a football website. You should start a blog. Again, I'm not doing that. That sounds like extra work. And I'm like a junior in college, and I already don't want to do my regular work. I want to drink beer and BS. Like that's all I want to do. I mean, that's all I still want to do, but nevertheless, at least the ended up paying the bills. But anyway, so then moving into the transition to like actually doing this as a job, my original life plan, and I've told this story on several podcasts before, but my original life plan was basically to go back to school after doing my undergraduate and go back into a PhD program to continue the research that I had done on social theory, sociology, and like specifically this is high key irony, is the specific theories that I was taking like older social interaction theories from the 1960s and like reimagining them for the digital age, specifically using the medium of Twitter. Again, very ironic now. Let me tell you what, a lot of the theories I see playing out with some of these weirdos all the time.
That's awesome.
So basically, but I decided I wanted to take 1 year off to kind of get some actual real life experience and, and experience the real world. As many times when people do that, they want to experience the real world. The real world can slap you right in the face. That's basically what happened to me. A lot of things went wrong in my personal life, from a mental health perspective, a physical health perspective. It was a rough go of it. And, it was just basically just be super blunt about it. I was extremely depressed, really in a dark place. And for whatever reason, I needed to give myself literally a reason to hang on. So I decided to, number one, get myself into shape. I had been overweight my entire life. I was like 320 pounds at my heaviest. And so I started doing that, but even that wasn't really enough. So for whatever reason, I just decided, now I'm going to finally start this football website because I love football. I love writing. And I did it for about 2 months just for fun. And then I kind of decided last minute, you know what, this sparks that joy inside of me. And I love it. And I find kind of purpose in this. And I was out there on Twitter, like starting to share some stuff with just people, starting to share articles with like writers that I had read and respected, and like getting good feedback. That's the coolest part of our industry, is that you can get that like instant feedback from your like heroes sometimes,
Oh, absolutely.
It's so cool. So I started doing that, and I just remember telling my parents, being like, look, I think I'm going to just pull all my grad school applications and do this and try to make this a full-time job. And that was the winter of 2013. I made that decision, and here we are now, 7 years later. And it's been a hell of a ride.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Well, and I think I've heard, some of your story in the past before, and it's something I've really connected with. And I think it's something that's helped me to appreciate your work even more, because I just shared it actually recently in one of my articles I released like last week, but it wasn't how I got into fantasy football, but how I got specifically into like dynasty fantasy football was very similar to your story. I was in a really dark season of my life, and I was, battling depression myself. And what I found in, that community was exactly that, was community. And I think that can be a really powerful thing. And that's why it's one of those things that's like, man, I love fantasy football, but I'm also really grateful for what fantasy football has done for me. And so I think for me, as someone who is now starting to get into like the content creator side of this, rather than just being a fan, you're someone who I've always, looked to as like, man, this guy is someone I connect with really well. I connect with his story. But on top of it, also, your work is incredible. And so it's so cool to hear your story and you get to hear that. And I think like, a lot of people who listen to our show will just get to appreciate a little bit of just, how honest you are about your story. And so thank you so much for sharing that, man.
Yeah, of course. And look, I think this is why it's so good to talk about these things, because like we've all sort of been through these, sometimes more extreme chapters than other. And it's scary to think about being back in that place, but it's just what you said, I think the community and the legit friendships that you end up making with people that sometimes you never meet. Like explaining that to, I'm sure you guys feel the same way if you have like, Marco, I know you've got a significant other, but
I also do. For the people, I do. She's
okay,
real.
Good.
She's real.
She was just here.
Yeah, she just
but
left.
explaining that to like a significant other, it's like, oh yeah, like my friend, who's this friend? When am I gonna be? Oh, probably never. That he lives in Chicago or something like that. But that's really cool. It's hard to explain to other people, but it is that community. And it's the same sort of thing we're doing right now. It's like sharing these stories with each other, building each other up. And it is obviously all based around this obsessive disease that we have with football, but it goes beyond that to making these sort of connections. And I think that has been something, like I said, legit part of the reason it saved my life. And I'm grateful that now I'm grateful I get to do it, and it's a job, which seems crazy, but it has been I still love being a part of like, the Twitter community and like going on people's podcasts and talking about this stuff. Cause I love football and I love talking to people. And it's awesome, man. It really is a great community of folks that we have. And like how you guys are doing a charity part of like, of your program. Like it's cool to see that that's such a big thing in fantasy too. And like, we could talk about like high rollers, high stake dynasty leagues or like gambling and sports betting is becoming more and more a thing. But the part I love about the fantasy community, I mean, it's all so focused on giving back. And that's what if you have any sort of platform, and this is why I think it's important to talk about my story and talk to other people about theirs. So if you have any sort of platform, you better be doing something to push back into the universe. Cause that's what I believe is that like, what we get to take an awful lot out of it. Especially like I said, this is my job, which again, crazy, right? This is my job. I'm very thankful for that. Better put some good stuff back into the universe as you're taking a lot from it.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Justin.
No, absolutely. That was one of the things when I kind of called Marco out of the blue, and this was maybe middle of December, and I was like, one, this season has just been significantly more than we thought it was going to be. This has grown much quicker than that. And I was like, there has to be some way we can, give back, whether it's through just getting people to laugh or physical donation. And we were brainstorming ideas and we came up with the fantasy combine. We're like, it's exactly what you said is the fantasy community has given us so much. If we can give them back just a little bit of, laughter, joy, and help some good causes along the way. Yeah. It means a lot more at that point to us.
Yeah, well, and I think something else too is like, I mean, I feel like fantasy Twitter has been a great place for us, but there's also like a part of fantasy Twitter where like people love just kind of being like jerks sometimes on Twitter, and so it's fun to be able to be like, hey, we're gonna go ignore those kinds of things, and we're just gonna kind of push out, like being able to give back, especially after the year everyone has just had, like. That's an exciting thing that this platform has been able to do, for us and what we love to do too.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's always going to be negativity out there, and I think it's good to just do what we can to try to, like you said, not ignore that, like realize it is there, and tell people like let's come over here and do some positive stuff for each other.
Right, absolutely. So I actually have a question for you, Matt. Going into, again, you've mentioned a few times, working in the fantasy industry. It is your job. I think what you've probably become best known for is reception perception. So I'm just kind of wondering, how did that methodology come about? Where did that come from? Because just as a fantasy football fan, that is one of the things, I mean, I know I personally use when I'm trying to identify just wide receiver value in general. The amount of times I have friends that just send me screenshots of specifically Curtis Samuel's reception. Oh, yeah, that's the one I always get. And like, we debate that constantly. So if you could just kind of go into how that came about, or even some of your methodology for determining these route success rates, that would be great, I think, for people.
Yeah. Sure. So we actually get this kind of come back to where we left off with deciding that I wanted to do this as a job. And I'm obviously writing just your typical stuff, right? Game recaps and rankings and stuff like that. And at that point, it's like, okay, I love doing this, but who's going to want to read this? My friends, sure, I guess. But at the same time, like when you're starting out, I always connected to this. I used to do the Backyard Banter podcast where I would interview sort of like what we're doing right now, talking about like how did you get to where you are, but yada yada with folks. I talked to JJ Zacharyson about this, I think on episode 3. He said, the thing that people have to realize is when you're starting out is that, no one cares about this stuff until you're established as a voice. Like, now if I put out like a game recap because I have like a platform or whatever, people are going to read it and then tell me why it's terrible and why I'm wrong.
Naturally.
Yeah, of course. But starting out, you have to sort of, there's got to be some differentiation between you and literally everybody else that's doing this. And, you know, I had no connections to anyone in media. I obviously didn't play the game. I obviously did not work for a team or anything like that. So how was I going to stand out in a crowd of many people? Basically, to me, it was like, all right, I've got to do something that answers a question that I have about football. And I figured if I have this question, a lot of people are probably going to have this question because I'm as obsessed about the NFL as anybody. So for me, it was, what are wide receivers doing? Because I was just drawn to this position. What are wide receivers doing when they run off the screen on Sundays? You know, because when we're watching games, you're not really able to see much of what a wide receiver does because the broadcast angle. And also I'm thinking to myself, you know, a wide receiver is lucky if he gets 10 targets in a game. Like, that's a lot. Like, oh, good. You're a stud. You're getting 10 targets. What are they doing on all those other passing plays, or even rushing plays that we're not seeing? And it just is crazy to me that, all right, they're measured by like the 5 or 8 catches they make in a game, but they're running like 30 plus routes. Somebody should really be out there trying to decide, like, or show like who is the best route runner in the NFL, because that's the trait that you hear people throw it out like, oh, this guy's a really good route runner. Well, tell me what that means. Like, measure that for me. So yeah, he's a C plus or a 6 on my route running scale. Well, what the hell does that mean? And obviously, being, again, to tap into like what I was doing from a academic perspective, like I was a heavy research nerd, like trying to take these qualitative realities of like humans interacting in society and putting that into quantifiable, understandable things for people. I'm like, well, I should just do that with wide receivers. So basically, I came up with the idea to go in and over an 8 games. Well, originally testing like when I could level out the data, I'm charting like full seasons of guys. My dad remembers coming over to the apartment that I was living in, my 1-bedroom apartment in Lynchburg, Virginia, and just seeing these papers strewn all across the floor. He's like, what the hell are you doing in here? I'm working on this thing for my website. It's called Reception Perception. It's about wide receivers football. He's like, okay, well, maybe clean it up a little. But, yeah, so that was kind of my thought, was to basically try to quantify the qualitative realities of player performance, individual of themselves. Like, again, wide receiver production is so inherently dependent on not just the quarterback, but, you know, the play calls got to go their way. The offensive line got to give the quarterback enough time. Like, do they even fit in the role or the team that they're with? And for me, I thought the only thing the wide receiver can really control is how often they run each route, and how good are they at getting separation, at getting open. So that's basically what I do. And I've been doing it now for, like I said, about 6. I think this will be the 7th season that I collect data on, which is pretty wild. There's like there's going to be, by the end of this year, there's going to be 300 players in the database. Wow. And it's basically essentially trying to quantify who are the best route runners in the NFL, where do they succeed on the field. And I've obviously learned a ton from just doing it, and I hope that people who consume it have learned a ton too. And obviously, of course, like you said, Justin, I love that people like debate this stuff. Well, like, does this really matter? Like, where do we put, like, how do we fit this into our analysis? Because I've never approached this as like, I mean, I'm obviously very radical in what I believe about wide receivers, and you know, like, just how much production is basically, you know, doesn't matter when evaluating skill, but that's from like just all the time spent doing this. But I also think like I've got the skeleton key, and every value must be determined based on my evaluations and the work that I've done. I love that it's part of the conversation and people use it as a debate point, this, that, or the other, because obviously I see it in my mentions all the time. So it's great. And I'm just trying to add more to the conversation about this specific position because I love it. It's my favorite position on the field.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point there where you say it's not necessarily this is the end all be all. And I think a lot of people in fantasy football, they tend to lean on one method only, and they're not changing their mind. And you're completely right where you need to be very fluid in how you assess any kind of player value, whether it's looking at production and then adding in team success along with reception, perception, or anything in those regards. I mean, it's just that's one of the biggest gaps I think in fantasy football when you're trying to make, you want to call it that next leap from someone who plays fantasy football to someone who wins at fantasy football. And that is, I think that's a phenomenal point to bring up.
Yeah, I think I would be insane if I, at the end of each offseason, went to the success rate versus man coverage metric in reception perception, sorted from top to bottom, and was like, "That's my draft list." That would be insane.
That's it.
Because, like you said, you got to take in all of these different methods, and production obviously matters. Opportunity is the king, but I think. Basically, it's sort of trying to win on the margins, right? Like, where can we find that advantage? And I'm not going to sit there in a fantasy draft because, if I'm saying that wide receiver production is inherently dependent on so many factors, obviously these guys can be crushing it in reception perception, and it doesn't work out from a production angle until all the other factors catch up, right? Like, I think Tyler Lockett in 2016 is a perfect example. I've always been honking about Tyler Lockett as a big breakout guy, but it didn't quite catch up until later on when he got healthy, when the offense started opening up a little bit more. And now obviously he's a very productive receiver. So Curtis Samuel, same thing. Like he was a guy that was, I think, really misused in 2019. They put him in a much more friendly role. And now he's insane. Even I wasn't expecting him to be like a top 30 receiver in PPR this year. And a lot of it's rushing. Like this is so basically, of course, it's just one factor. I think I'm just like for fantasy specifically, I would never tell you to just like take reception perception and go draft. It's like take it and mold it into everything else. Now, if we're talking about ranking wide receivers and like how good they are, that's where I start to get a little radical about what I'm doing, because it's not like what I'm doing. It's just I believe I'm not doing anything special over here. I'm just spending an absurd amount of time watching these guys and recording the results so that you don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think that's one of the things. I mean, we've talked about Curtis Samuel a little bit, and I'm probably the one who's probably blown up Justin with too many photos of reception perception Curtis Samuel. But
it was veiled. It was you. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, very
it was all you.
Yeah, any of our listeners know that I've probably like quoted your reception perception on this podcast many times before. But I mean, one of the things you talked about is just like how much work, putting together something like reception perception is. And so for you, how have you navigated a little bit of, the work-life balance? I know you mentioned you're engaged, and has that changed from like when you started to now, or kind of what's that looked like in this process and in this kind of journey for you?
Oh, great question. I would say that my fiance doesn't think I'm always the best at the work-life balance, but but this is a serious thing. If people out there are trying to break into the industry, it is a lot of work. It should be. If you're going to do it well, it's a lot of work. There is a time commitment, and you gotta be with someone that understands that. I again, I'm going to quote the Backyard Banter podcast. When we did that, I had an episode with Adam Levitan, and this was back when he was post Roto World, but established the run, so it hadn't even started his own company yet. And I've talked to Adam since then, and he's like, it's even worse, work life is worse when you're actually running a company or something like that. Right. So back then, the way he said it was, you have to be with somebody that accepts you're going to live an alternate lifestyle, which is like it sounds extreme, but at the same time, 6 months out of the year, if we want to go from August to December, about that time frame, you're going to just be like every night again has like a regimen. It's like, well, we can't do anything Monday night because there's Monday Night Football. Sunday, that's shot. We can't like go out on a Saturday night and have a lot of fun. And this obviously we can't go out anywhere now. Drunk on the couch, I guess, but you know what I mean. Basically, like we can't go out on a Saturday night and have a lot of fun because I got to be up at 6 a.m. the next morning to be on a show, and that's all part of it. And then obviously, like with reception perception, it's for me that grind doesn't like slow down the rest of. In fact, it's like back here in the next couple of weeks, it's going to pick right back up again, where I'm going to be charting 50 plus players and doing all that work. And it's a lot of work, but like I said, it's the good thing about being in a relationship with somebody is you got to be with somebody that's going to understand that, like I said. And then just in general, work-life balance, it is important because even when you're doing something that you love, you still need to have other hobbies. Like if I was just a person that only talked about football and, oh my God, only talked about wide receivers, like I wouldn't be a very interesting person to be around. So,
right. There's a good chance you wouldn't be engaged now.
Oh yeah, right. And like people always ask me, they're like, "What did your fiance think when you first told her about reception perception?" I'm like, I kept the details light. Put it that way. So let me tell you who doesn't care about Curtis Samuel. Like,
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
So I think, but like basically, work-life balance is really important, and I don't know that I always have the right answers for that because it is something I love doing. Like I love sitting here and charting Justin Jefferson for 7 hours or something like that.
Right.
But there's more to life than that, and there's always more work to do beyond that. So balancing those things are important, and like I would say, just finding other things that you love is important because it's still call and scratch that same itch too.
Yeah, no, totally. I feel like I can totally relate with that. I mean, my wife and I were in our 5th year of marriage this year. So, but especially like in this last year, we've obviously started this, and I normally geek out a little bit about fantasy football before we got here. Obviously, that's like
an understatement, but
right. But like I'll without thinking start talking about something, and she'll be like, I don't know what you're saying to me. I couldn't tell you any of the names you just said to me or words really. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. That's my bad.
We're at the point.
I don't know if you got, when you watched the Nickelodeon game, we watched
awesome.
God bless her. She sits there and not watches all the games with me. We'll sit there and watch a lot.
Yeah.
Still spending time together, even if I'm dialed in on something. But when the Nickelodeon broadcast came on, they're explaining, like when they did a little explanation at the beginning of like football basically for kids, she was like, "This is better than anything you've told me for years now." So yeah, I completely relate to the idea of I'm talking to a person who I share my entire life with, and they're like, "What are you talking about?"
Yes,
well,
exactly.
It's funny you mentioned that because I think one of the important things, again, and my girlfriend and I have also been dating for just under 5 years. Justin
asked his girlfriend out at me and my wife's wedding. So
wow, Justin, kind of a bold move. That's kind of the upstaging.
Here we go. Oh yeah, it was. Everybody cared about that significantly more.
Yeah, nobody even remembered we got married. I don't think.
Yeah.
Like
we were there for Justin and Sarah's anniversary. That's why we're here.
Right.
But the one thing is, like, as much as I will talk about it with her, and I know she doesn't care, she pretends to. Like, that goes a long way. Because when I told her, I was like, "Oh, like we got Matt Harmon on the show." She's like, "Oh my God, really? That's awesome." And I was like, "You have no idea who that is." She goes, "Not a clue." I was like, "But you're excited for me, so I'll just take that. Like, I'll take the little win that you cared enough to lie to me."
Yeah, well, even if it's not a lie, and just like you can explain, like you'll never believe what this person said to me on Twitter today, that type of stuff. And you know, there's ways that you can communicate it without being like, well, so when they're in 11 personnel, they usually move Curtis Samuel to the slot, and then blah, blah, blah. No one wants to hear about that,
right?
But yeah, of course, it and that is part of the supportive process too. Is like being able to talk to your person, and you know, they're at least like when I talk about my plans for reception perception, or like what do we want to do this off season that's different, that like then because she's actually works in social media and digital media as well, so that's been nice because we can relate that way. But so there's ways to talk about it, but again, certainly there's a barrier of entry where I don't want. And I actually have dated in the past girls who were really into football, and let me tell you, it's not fun to be in a fight with your girlfriend about should Carson Palmer or Philip Rivers each other in fantasy, and especially bad when you're wrong.
Right. That's awesome. Oh man, that's good. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that because I mean, my wife and I, we've been together for a long time, and so I haven't dated someone ever who's like okay, I'm going to fight with you about football. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's good. Good and bad to each. But
right.
I'm in love with the person I'm with, and I love that we don't need to talk about Curtis Samuel's route running.
Exactly. No, well, that's awesome. So I think, honestly, it would be awesome to kind of, as we come to the close of this episode, getting to talk to you a little bit about exactly, the things that you do really, really well, which is talk about some of these wide receivers really quick. Sure. And so heading into like 2021, outside of, we'll maybe talk about rookies in a second, but heading into 2021, are there any receivers that are a little bit under the radar that you're really excited about? Yeah,
this is almost like an interesting wide view conversation about wide receivers in general, because, man, you almost wonder if it's an oversaturated market, because there's just so many guys right now. Obviously the 2020 class was really hyped up for years before the draft even was ready to kick off. Yeah. And I think it lived up to the billing, right? Like, there's a lot of good players from this class and a lot of guys that I think could take that next step too in coming years. But man, the 2018 class, I think in hindsight was underrated. DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, Cortland Sutton's coming back next year. Cortland Sutton's a great guy that people forget how good he was and how good he was in his second season. He's someone that he could fly under the radar, right? Because just, again, all of these other guys. And then the 2019 class came along, and like the stars of today and tomorrow are from that class, especially. Like, right, yeah. DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, like those guys, I think are all fringe top 10 receivers right now. But there's a lot of are already top 10 receivers. So it's a hard give and take there. And then obviously we have this 2020 crop that flooded the market even more. Yeah. And now 2021, there's another. I haven't fully dove in at all to like rookie prep yet, because talk about work-life balance. I'm not diving into dynasty and draft prep in December. Let me tell you that. That'll be next month's. That's February Matt's problem. Maybe March, Matt. We will figure that out as we go. But yeah, so like that group is still, there's a lot of I know there's a lot of quality players coming in the draft pipeline this year, and it's just like, man, there's so many guys. It's hard for almost anyone to be there at this point. You just wonder if like, where are these guys going to land, and what wide receiver rooms are they going to disrupt? And oh, by the way, too, not only the incoming draft prospects, the free agent class in wide receivers is unbelievable. Unbelievable, right? Like Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin, Kenny Galladay, the aformentioned Curtis Samuel, who's obviously the first. No, he's number 2. He's ever above A-Rob for me, but Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't know if I said Kenny Galladay already, but I'll say it again. Kenny Galladay, Mark Jones. The damn Lions don't have any receivers on that. Quintez Cephas, that is it. So yeah, there's a lot of quality. There's going to be a really quality amount of player movement this offseason. I think is going to shake things up a lot.
Yeah, one to kind of put you on the spot here. Because the last 2 seasons we've seen a bit of a trend. We've seen the late breakouts from Devontae Parker and Corey Davis, and then we've seen the third-year breakouts with Godwin and Calvin Ridley. If you had to pick a player for 2021 that could fill the you want to call it the new age Calvin Ridley and the new age Corey Davis, who are those guys?
Yeah, well, the Calvin Ridley one's interesting because I remember writing about who is going to be this year's Chris Godwin in the offseason.
Exactly.
And, because I think the Godwin model especially provided such a specific set of parameters. And number one, which is, again, I think the most important thing is like Godwin was verifiably good at the game. Like if you watch Godwin at any point in his last year at Penn State, if you follow reception perception at any point, it would say like Chris Godwin is a baller. This guy's good, right? You watch him play, you can just tell he's good at like all factors of playing wide receiver. And then he was going to line up across from a top end receiver that we all agree is really good in Mike Evans. But there would still be enough volume there for him to succeed while playing across from an alpha and sort of be that 1B. And I think Evans and Godwin are a 1B, just like Ridley and Julio Jones ended up becoming a 1A, 1B. Maybe that's actually flipped though at this point, just because of the progression of those two guys' career at this point. Some of the other candidates I wrote for last year, like filling into that specific model as like a 1B that was verifiably good at the game, that was going to play in an offense, was going to throw the ball a lot, or at least enough to support just two guys, was going to be, it was Ridley, DK Metcalf. Obviously, I think Metcalf like surged to be the one there in Seattle.
Yeah.
But again, two really good receivers there. Deontay Johnson, who I think you could say surged to be the one
guy.
there as well.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad we're on the same page.
I'm a huge Deontay fan. Yeah.
Because I think he's the guy. Like he's the guy I would pick for this year. Like, not necessarily because like I think we should know Deontay's good at the game, despite the fact he dropped a bunch of passes. Like it is
right. Yeah.
When you're getting thrown 2-yard passes that are coming at you at 1.5 seconds and you never face properly, like the first pick that Ben threw in that playoff game, I tweeted about it at the time. It was like short, high, over the middle, behind Deontay Johnson. That's a pass he's thrown all year, and like sure, clang off the receiver's hands, but I'm not counting that as a problem just for the pass catcher. He had some drop issues this year, but like the separation is great. I want to see what Pittsburgh, if Ben, please, Ben, retire, get out of our lives.
Yes.
I'm done with him. I'm done with him.
Great career, but you just like, come on, man, you don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know what they do at quarterback if Ben does retire. I know they just signed Dwayne Haskins. I'm going to take the under on whatever prop you'd like to list there.
Right.
But I think he's the guy that could take that like next leap. Sort of like Calvin Ridley and Chris Godwin were productive around 800-yard guys. I think Johnson could take that next leap and be a potential fringe wide receiver one if things break right in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I love that call, because when I went into asking this question, I'd be lying if I didn't say, in the back of my head, I was saying, please say Deontay. Please say Deontay Johnson. Because the arguments the last 2 years I've had with Marco and the other guys on the podcast over Calvin Ridley and Deontay Johnson, like that just, it makes me happy to just put it, to be very frank. So I like. I mean,
those are two reception perception guys. Like they are
exactly
route runners, strong separators. They fill into that sort of, not comparing these players, but the Antonio Brown, Stephon Diggs, like Terry McLaurin, Calvin Ridley, Deontay Johnson, and then maybe further down the line, we're talking about the Curtis Samuel types. Like that's that axis of receivers,
right?
And those are all just like reception, perception, side, reception, perception, side, blah, 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 down the line, right? Because they are smaller guys that win on their routes and create separation. And I fall for those receivers hard every single year. And I think Johnson, I would rank behind a guy like Terry McLaurin. I think McLaurin's better. I think he could be. I think McLaurin could be like a true superstar. And I mean, he had 1,100 yards in a bad offense this year. I would love talk about quarterback movement. I would love to see Washington go and get like a Matt Stafford guy. Yeah, and actually, it's interesting too because they just hired Martin Mayhew, and Mayhew obviously was a GM in Detroit for some time as well. Maybe there's some connective tissue there. I just placed that now in my brain. Let me marinate on that one.
Because
I'm just putting that one now because I've been saying they should go after Stafford since the end of the season because they're not a team that gets connected with him very often. But I love Terry McLaurin. I think Antonio Gibson's on the rise, and obviously the pride of Lynchburg, Virginia, Logan Thomas, baby. I think Thomas is on the upswing as well. So that's a guy that I think McLaurin will be better than Deontay Johnson. Like I think that McLaurin could be sort of a Diggs, Odell Beckham type of player. Beckham obviously at his peak. But Johnson, I think, could be that sort of next down version of that, which is probably like a Calvin Ridley type of player.
Right. Yeah. And I was a Deontay Johnson fan out of college. Liked him his rookie year, but I really wasn't on a big hype train until I did see his reception perception chart. And I was like, okay. I was like, there's something here. I mean, and he already had the production his rookie year to kind of back that up. So that was just another factor on top. And like that love progressed. I mean, from like June to by the time I was drafting in August, tenfold. I was like, I like Deontay. And then it was, I need to have Deontay. Like it really reached that point. And then again, for you guys listening, that is what reception perception I think is most ideally used for. Because if guys don't have some sort of production to back up, again, winning on every single route or the majority of their routes, there's probably some kind of reason. So the baseline needs to be, are they starting to see work? Because if there's no work whatsoever and they're just out there running, there may be a reason. So that to me is one of the main uses for reception perception in my mind.
Yeah, and I tweeted about this last offseason too. Like there are thresholds within reception perception where it's just like at this point, you know, when you start to finish at a certain level, it's very likely that you're going to find that production at some point,
right?
In your career, right? Like the only guys I think that start, like depending on where you want to set the threshold, like if you're above the 90th percentile, the only guy who hasn't recorded a 1,000-yard season now at this point is Curtis Samuel, but he had 1,000 total yards, so come on,
that counts. That counts.
Yeah, it counts. If you guys are counting, I'm counting. Let me tell you that. But yeah, so like if you're above that 90th percentile, and that's where a guy like Terry McLaurin is. You know, that's where Lockett was another one before his time. Ridley, obviously, before this year was above 90th percentile. Like at some point, those guys are going to break out. Then you get to like that 85th percentile. That's where you start to see some guys that you would probably say at this point are never going to. They might be. Some of them are like Anthony Miller's the guy that I'm like, that might be like the outlier of the outliers. That one's not going too well.
It's not happening.
As Bears
probably
fans,
not going to happen.
Understand that, yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, I'm sure. Yeah. So he might be the one that it's like that's one that's not going to work out. Tough scene. Sterling Shepard is a guy that's like he's solid, but he's probably never going to be an elite fantasy receiver for many factors. But like those are the only guys once you start to go down to like the 85th percentile that now you're talking like. But again, that we're talking about 300 players in the database. That's a pretty good hit rate. Then you go down to 80th, and like once you're below 80th, like anything could happen. But 80th, then you're talking about like those guys and Willie Snead. Willie Snead, fine little NFL player. Probably not gonna happen. So yeah, basically it's sort of that. It's sort of like we're saying. Once you get to certain thresholds, it's very likely that you will find that production at some point. But yeah, there's always going to be, as the years progress, there will be other Anthony Millers. But the odds would say very unlikely. So yeah, definitely always use it within the context of other things. And damn it, like Miller should have had that opportunity this year too. Just kind of blew it.
Yeah. He doesn't have a lot of drops, but when I watch him, he is phenomenal at dropping the ball in key moments. That is what he does. The amount of drops that turn into interceptions or fourth down drive killers, that's his specialty. That was I think for an offense that has like no margin for error too. I think that's what basically got him like sent to the bench. So yeah, I'll just have to hope that Antonio Brown doesn't re-sign with the Bucs and Miller gets cut and goes to Tampa Bay. Some crazy thing like that where I can talk myself back into it again.
Yeah, I mean, as Bears fans, I think we know that what's going to kill any drive for the Bears is Anthony Miller or Matt Nagy calling like a triple reverse after they gain to like three like 10-yard plays in a row. It's like, all right, triple reverse this and let's.
Well, you got to get your Cordero Patterson play in.
Exactly.
I love my good friend Greg Rosenthal from the NFL Network. He had a line, I think, on one of the ATN podcasts where it's like when a coaching staff gets to the point of the season where they're like, or not the point of the season, the point in like their time there, where it's like we got to get Cordero Patterson more involved. That's usually the sign you're coming to the end of the road. Unfortunately for the Bears, it wasn't the end of the road. They're back. The
Bears are like, we need more Patterson.
Yeah. Usually it's a good signal that they're out of ideas. They're out of traditional ideas.
Yeah, no, for sure. Oh, all right. Well, I got one question for you left here, and I mean, you kind of talked about you haven't dove into this rookie class too much, but just from what you know about the rookie class right now, outside of some of like the major names that people are talking about, is there anyone that you're excited to really dive into as you kind of break down some of the rookie reception perception stuff going into this next season?
Yeah, one guy I'm excited about checking out. I mean, this is not a firm take yet. I'm just excited to look into it because I'm here in LA, so I'm familiar with USC football. I'm excited. St. Brown, the next iteration of St. Brown, because I was a big Equanimous guy until you start hearing things where it's like, yeah, he doesn't do special teams and doesn't stretch. It's like, whoa, what?
That seems bad.
That seems bad. But I do think, like, when you watch, similar to when you watched Equanimous in college, like, there's something there. So he's a player that I don't know if I'm going to be in on him. I don't know if I'm going to like him, but I'm excited to check him out because that can be sort of maybe a conversation about the beyond the Jamar, the Chase, the Smith, that conversation. Like I said, there's a lot of potential good receivers in this class, and I think sort of trying to differentiate between that next tier is going to be key.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Justin knows that I have been like in love with St. Brown for a while now. Yeah. I haven't gotten a chance to dive into him too much yet either, but just from what we have been able to see from this past season and the season prior, he looks like he's going to be a solid player. And so I'm excited, and I hope he does go the opposite way of what Equanimous did. So
stretch, man. Just get out there and do some stretching. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Just a little bit of stretching, and it'll all work out, maybe.
Yeah, honestly, for a guy, I mean, Equanimous is still on the Packers. Right. Like he came back from an IR stint too. Again, probably never going to happen, but. Like for a guy that was like, I'm not playing special teams, and he's managed to stick around the league. That's an accomplishment right there. Because usually when you're a day 3 receiver and you're like, I'm not doing special teams, you're like, well, you're not doing anything.
Exactly.
I will never forget reading that headline and just being like, oh, never mind. Like any sort of takes I've got the rest of the way, forget it. You're not.
They're gone.
They're gone. Let's strike that from the record. So let me tell you what, if you're trying to make the NFL as a day 3 receiver, I definitely don't care about your success rate on routes if you're not stretching and doing special teams.
Exactly.
That's the bare minimum to be in reception perception is do you stretch?
Do you stretch? Yeah. Do you stretch? Do you yoga or something? I don't know.
That's like part of your checklist. It's like stretch. Okay, good. Special teams. Good. All right, great.
It's like that's the basic casting that I'm looking for here.
Yeah. That's awesome. Oh, man. All right. Well, I think that is going to be a wrap for us. Matt, thank you so much for being here. We are just honored to get the chance to talk to you and connect with you, man. We are excited to see all that you've got for Reception Perception coming up this season. You've been sneaking in a lot of exciting opportunity that might be coming there. So I'm excited to check that out, man. If you're listening to us or watching us, don't forget, you can find us 14personnel.com. Jump in and check out what the Fantasy Combine's all about. We're going and giving back to St. Jude and Melanoma Research Alliance. And you can follow Justin and myself on Twitter at Marco_14P and at Justin_14P. Matt, you want to shout out your Twitter handle just in case anyone's not following you already?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're a couple of we're 3 underscore bros here. Matt Harmon _BYB. Think about let me tell you guys though. Think about how long you want to stick with that underscore though, because at some point you'll be like me and you'll be verified on the old Twitter.com. You guys will get your check marks too. when you hit it big and you exceed past, like you make me irrelevant. You succeed beyond. You can't undo that once they slap that check mark on you. It's like getting an X. I don't have a tattoo of my ex here, but I'm saying just as an example. It's like having an ex-girlfriend's name tattooed on you. Like you can't take that off, and you got to.
That's a great point.
People are always like, "What's the deal with the underscore?" I'm like, "Well, BYB it was Backyard Banter, your David by Original blog, and like, well, you know what? At the same time, if you want to rep it, it's cool." But yeah, basically, I don't know why the hell I want to do all that. Base underscore bit there. Tough team when you're doing a.
If we didn't have an underscore bit on this episode, I don't think people would really care too much about the rest. So
right, tough thing when you're doing a bit on a keyboard button. But anyway, if people want to follow me, at Matt Harmon _BYB. Hashtag Reception Perception is where you're going to find a lot of this content. And obviously, if you want to check me out on Yahoo, there's plenty of good stuff there, which I will be linking to on the Twitters. So there you go.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man. And we will hopefully get a chance to talk to you again sometime heading into next season or something.
Hell yeah, that would be great, guys. Thanks so much for having me, and definitely down to do this again.
Awesome.